Hello to our audience, and welcome to the MAPcast, where we shine a spotlight on leaders in the B2B space who have invaluable experience and insights to share. So today, we're talking with Avni Trivedi. And Avni, could you introduce yourself and your company?
Absolutely. So I'm Avni Trivedi. I'm the CEO and founder of Trivigil and NextGen Shield, which I'll talk about in a second. They're both related. But I started my journey in my career more from a very different lens. I always tell, young people, anybody else, right? Most of us don't have a straight line of a career. We usually have a very squiggly, crazy one. So started in finance, moved to sales and sales operations in the Fortune 500 world, and somewhere realized that, coming from an entrepreneurial family, maybe that was an itch that I always had, and jumped both feet in with Trivigil, where we have cybersecurity services and software mainly to protect educational institutions. And education was my big passion because, having come from the edtech world, our educational institutions are very vulnerable and continue to be under a lot of duress from various fronts, and cybersecurity being one of them. So we're here to be their partner to solve that.
That brings up an interesting question. So why do you think that is that maybe education, do you feel like they're a bit behind the curve of enterprise when it comes to cybersecurity?
I think there's two parts, or actually three parts to it, right? One, educational institutions house so much data. They have way more data than a Google. Think about, large school district like LA Unified, or, any of those, right? They have more students and student data than Google as a whole, right? So thinking about that as a starting point, they house a lot of data. To your point, they do have some lagging infrastructure, right? COVID did accelerate a lot of that,
Right.
just to get them back on track with some of the enterprise level. But they're still lagging on a lot of fronts. And three, their resources are, like I said, under duress. They depend on bonds and taxes from a K-12 perspective and community college perspective. And even the privates are going through a lot of churn right now to understand where they can spend and where they cannot. So there's budgetary capabilities and all of that are putting more pressure on them as well. So all three of that kind of has become a perfect storm.
Uh-huh.
One can argue this storm has been going on since COVID. Yes, it has. If you think about it, every year, educational institutions are targeted. One of the highest, actually, ransom attacked industry as a whole because of these factors that I mentioned. And they're still on the rise. There's 25% year on year increase this year alone from last year. And I don't think that trajectory is going away anytime soon with AI and the advent of AI and the usage of AI. So it's just a lot of data that is very valuable that can be used for a lot of purposes, and that's the main reason they're targeted.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that schools have kind of adopted a cloud first attack as far as cybersecurity goes, employing stuff like secure service edge, et cetera? Is that kind of the direction they're taking, or
They are they
are
are
they behind the
working through
curve on
that. They're working through that, right? It's a little bit of inside out versus
that?
outside in, right? So, hey, I'm going to start with think about physical security. I'm going to start with the firewalls and just assume that's a good
Right.
enough layer. And now they're starting to work from the outside in, which is saying a lot of the threat is actually from the inside. And by the inside, I mean, people clicking on things that they shouldn't, right? So it's
Right.
a common, not misconception, but a common thing to talk to schools about is, hey, there's a lot of outside in that we are protecting, but the inside out has to have a lot more capability built in. And I think that they're struggling with the confusion, right? If you think about the industry, there's just so much software out there that they can think through and work through, right? Okay, what do I need an EDR? Do I need an XDR? Do I need a network? Like, it's a lot. And if you think about who really is running an IT shop at a school, usually it's someone who's, run up the ranks,
Yep.
or, like last year's, librarian, this year's IT manager, right? So the knowledge base is not there,
Right.
and the confusion is high, which is where we step in and say, okay, we can be that trusted partner that is on your side. We're part of your team, whether it's through our, VC services, or whether through a partner network, right? We can be that liaison that says, here's how you build it within your budget, and here's how you do it right with a roadmap.
Now, is your role consultative exclusively, or do you have your own applications that you've developed?
It's consultative from this angle perspective,
Uh
but
huh.
the one area which is my passion, is the fact that I started off Trivigil and NextGen Shield thinking I'm a mom of a 10 and 13-year-old. Kids are just all over the internet at all times, even if I don't want them to be. And the students' data is already out there. It is done. Kind of like I mentioned, right? Year-on-year increase in attacks equals to data already being out, right? It's done. Now they're going to be social engineered to death, right? So whether it's a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 21-year-old, doesn't matter, right? Their data is out there.
That's true.
So we are actually launching a AI-powered gamified learning platform that helps kids learn their own digital safety and empowers them to feel confident to be able to be in the real world, understanding the stranger danger, so to speak, in the online world. And I
Hmm.
and I speak about that from a, we are still working with schools to deploy this, but at the end of the day, we're meeting the kids where they're at. Think Duolingo for digital safety, right? You know,
Yep.
the stranger no longer is a white van. The stranger now is, your phone.
Yep.
So there's a lot of shift that needs to occur, and schools are still working through their own cyber infrastructure. That the training of the students is probably not high on their priority list, and we are actually helping them say we will be that conduit that ensures that the students are getting trained as you're still figuring out your own cyber structure, right? So reducing the risk in one hand,
Hmm.
but also being a partner in the other hand.
No, I think it's brilliant. It's a brilliant approach. I bet you don't have a lot of competition that's as industry specific as
No, no, we don't. And some of that is, by design, like I said, when you speak the language of education, you immediately understand them and they understand you, right? And that's a huge plus.
okay.
But from the student perspective, I think we don't have any. There's a lot to be done. I mean, we can talk about everything from trafficking to online bullying, right? The student angle is going to have a lot more mandates coming down, I think, from the government.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit on a personal level. How has your role evolved since you came up with the idea for this company? And what went as you expected and what went completely sideways and you weren't expecting it at all? Tell us a little bit about what surprised you about this
For
journey.
sure. That's I think the biggest element of learning for most people, right? Is what you don't expect. I was kind of thrown into this. I would say it was an opportunistic move. I
Hmm.
laid off from a job, and I was trying to take another job, which turned out to be more of an interim role. And through all of that, I was just like, it's time to just jump into my own thing. So it was opportunistic from that standpoint. But as I was going through the process, right, there's three things I would say that surprised me. One, I always believe that having the right people around you is the right way to start, and that way you have momentum, right? So being alone is not the right way to start, and was my opinion. I still believe in that, but I think the right people is one thing, but having the people with the right attitude, because startups are volatile environments, right? Not everybody's made for that. They could be the most skilled salesperson on the planet that you pull from another company, but if they don't understand the startup volatility, they're unable to actually function in that. And I think that's very, very important. I understand why Y Combinator or any of the accelerators, kind of mandate a co-founder,
Hmm.
because I think any team, any founding team that comes together, and doesn't matter if you don't give them equity, you give them equity, you give them part equity, doesn't matter, right? The point is that when you have a team that you put together to begin with, they're all kind of co-founders in some way, shape, or form, because
Sure.
they understand this risk reward system that you're building, right? You're betting on the future, you're betting on the long run, you're not betting on now. And so when salaried employees, I think that's a kind of a delicate balance of sorts. So I think that was one lesson, right? I think I have a great co-founding team, and we've had some errors on the way along the way of having people who are not on board with the same idea. But that lesson has now put us in a place of, okay, we understand this, right? So as we're building, we're going to be very, very cautious of what we bring on. So that's one. Two, I think pivots are necessary. I mean, as a founder, I started with the idea of, hey, we'll be the only, not only services but reseller of products to education, because they don't have anybody specifically focused on them. Quickly
Right.
you realize, right, there's a lot of resellers, okay, out there. And
Tons.
you have a CDWG, their pricing cannot be matched by a small little company, even though our focus is so high on education. So I think that's just one example of a pivot. We pivoted to more intentional partners that we can resell who are in this with the same, with the same mindset. So I think, pivots are necessary. I would say, a lot of people say fail fast. And as a founder, and fail is a wrong word. I think it just means if your first idea has to change, be open to changing it and do it quickly, because the more nimble you are, the better, for
Right,
sure.
right. What challenges have you come across just in growing the business that maybe you weren't expecting, in sales or marketing or any of these areas? Were there some challenges or surprises in just the whole growth of
I
the
would say
of the company?
macro factors.
Yeah.
Education as a whole is very stressed right now with
Yes.
the government, the funding. Just to give an example, one of the areas which I still think will be intact, but because of the volatility, it's still a little bit of a question mark. Is the E-rate program that K-12 has with the federal government, or the FCC actually gives billions of dollars to K-12 for internet and basic functionality. It's called the E-rate program. 2024 was the first year they announced that this pilot will be expanded to cybersecurity, which means that schools could use this funding. And then 2025 was the first year that they were able to actually apply for it, right? Now, we've started this process in January, and it was a $200 million pilot. And there's a lot of question marks around it. So it's still out there. It's still, been talked about as going to continue, but we've not really seen the results of something like that very quickly as we would have if the macro factors were not this volatile, I think. So I think
Understood.
that's the headwinds, right? We have to work with what we got. The reality is, even with all of that, the ransom attacks, all of that are still very, very high. So there's high demand. It's just how quickly our schools and universities able to move. That's kind of slowed down with the macro factors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you sort of see things shaking out in the future? Just what changes do you see your company going through in addressing, let's say this major shift happens and it really does take hold. Are there changes that you'll need to make to kind of adjust to that?
Yeah, so some of the, I call it de-risking
Uh,
elements, right? So we see the macro factors, right? But we still see the demand. We started working with a lot of channel partners within the higher ed space that already had a foothold. So if you think about just IT services, or any MSP,
right.
we started partnering more with them and saying, okay, you're already in the door, with a lot of trust and effort. We'll just be your cyber arm to help you proliferate the portfolio to be end to end. So
Right.
that's some of the de-risking, right? So we're not actually going against the headwinds, but we already have people on the ground who are already within the schools that can actually go and manage that. So that was one. I mean, Doctums is an example. They're our higher ed partner. We're doing great work with them in the higher ed space. And I think that strategy is working, right? Just having partners. The software element that I talked about, right? The kid safety element does not really exist. And the true risks to parents,
You mean the guardrails around their personal information?
all of that, right? Just but even their safety, as in, do they understand grooming? Do they understand online bullying, right? So all
Yep.
the online identity and the risk to that is now, for everybody to go and go exploit, pretty much.
Right.
I think that is a tailwind to me, because it's in the sense that not everybody knows how bad it is.
Uh-huh.
Imagine this: 1 in 5 children are targeted by an online predator, right? Those are high numbers. And we are at the forefront of driving that change and helping with the gamified platform I talked about. So I think that's a pioneering effort. There's a lot of support behind it, because in spite of the headwinds I talked about that are macro, superintendents are under a lot of pressure, parents are under a lot of pressure. This is something that will be part of the student well-being mission for any school, and we're
Mhm.
right there to ensure that it happens correctly.
No, that's fantastic, and I think what you're doing is a good thing. You must love not just the growth of the business, but what you're achieving for kids. That's gotta be very gratifying.
It's very exciting. My MASK NextGen is going to be awesome. And the best part about it is, Paul, is that my daughters 10 and 13 are absolutely part of it. So
Oh,
they're
that's
they're
great.
test subjects, and they are everything from, hey, this doesn't look good to me, or I don't like this game, to we want to be behind this with our friends. So it's just
Yeah,
an
that's
exciting.
gotta be gratifying. I work with my daughter pretty regular. I mean, I have a day job as well, but I work with her quite a bit and, just the day to day, she calls me and asks me questions, and there's nothing more gratifying. I have 6 kids. I wish they all wanted my help so much, so. So, I think you've kinda told me what's working well for you right now. What's been frustrating for you? Just in the nuts and bolts stuff.
I would say just as a founder, we are starting from a place of vision, strategy, big picture, right?
Alright.
Uh, and a lot of hope because we're driving faith and hope. And sometimes it's really hard to hold on to hope when you're not seeing it in the actual numbers.
Yeah.
So, in the summer we did see a dip in our sales or in revenue because, most schools are out for the summer and the spending has been a little bit depressed with the macro environment, right? I think that just keeping your eye on the ball and eye on the vision while you're going through the true ups and downs is the difficult part for sure. Even though, hope should not be a strategy, but you almost need faith to be able to drive the team to keep the momentum alive. And even though we have dips, that momentum can be a little bit difficult to fathom as we
Yeah.
keep the vision. So I would say that's as someone who's going through it a lot right now, and like I said, there's a lot of macro factors. That's the one thing I wanna pay it forward by telling people about it, so
Mhm.
almost like you're not alone. Hey, if you're feeling like, "Oh my gosh, today I just can't do this anymore," it's very normal. It's very normal to have that feeling, but if the idea is right, if the momentum is right and has been big picture, that faith and hope is almost necessary delusion one needs to have.
I've always mindset is everything. It really is, and you can let negativity affect physical aspects of your business. So yeah, I think you're 100% on there. So what metrics are you most focused on improving of the metrics that may frustrate you in the business? Is it the spiky nature of the business, or is it because you want to level that out, or can you give me an overview of kind of where you're focusing your time and attention?
Yeah, I would say it's a spiky nature. It's the predictability, right? Of it. And it's sometimes like we call it forecasting, predictability, all of these things.
All right.
When you're driving to a certain kind of predictability and you see that spikiness, it's really hard to then, think through the next predictability cycle, right? So the way we overcome it right now is that we're really driving top of the funnel, almost like to have a really large top of the funnel. And one of the ways we're trying to do that now is definitely deploying AI agents. I mean, that is the future of, how we're gonna have, SDRs, BDRs, you call it, right?
Yep.
That is going to be necessary. Someone that's working on your behalf 24/7
Hmm.
is going to be a necessary way, I think, to drive top of the funnel. And once you have a large top of the funnel, even though the spikiness is kind of more middle to end of the funnel, you have that big funnel to then say, okay, how do we go and target now to mitigate some of the risks, right?
Yeah, effective outreach is well, it's a big reason why Map AI exists. Is that Madison, my daughter, she saw a big gap in just outreach, and how much of that can you automate? How much of that needs a human touch? And that's kind of her concentration. So I can relate to that. So you'd mentioned that one of your goals is sort of smoothing out that curve, but what are your personal goals for the business? Where do you see yourself in a year, 2 years from now?
So smoothing out Trivigil is one goal, but next gen shield with mask is actually my true goal for the next year. We have currently raised about $800,000
Nice.
through investors, as well as we're just accepted International Accelerator, which is an incubator here in Austin. That's going to give us access to privates and international schools. So again, this is part of the de-risking for mask, right? We have a lot of public schools we're testing. Currently, we're all in beta testing, but our big launch is January for the game and the program.
That's
So
got to be exciting.
it's very exciting. And
And probably nerve-wracking, I would imagine.
all of the above, all of the
Yeah.
above. We have a great team. I have a great delivery team. I have a great go-to-market team. Through all of these investments that have come through, that we're marching to a pretty good target. I mean, the goal within the next year is we're at Series A with Mask and NextGen Shield and have about 500,000 students already on the platform. That is the real goal.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And are you offering like free versions of this that schools can try, or
Yeah,
what's
all
kind of
our
your
beta
strategy?
all our beta partners right now, we have County of Education. We're working with Richardson ISD, Desert Sands Unified School District in California, Niles Township, and Greenville, South Carolina. There's just about 2 million kids just right there. Beta testing, because we really want to get it right. So we're offering free beta testing, which will allow them to get an option for very, 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 very discounted pricing for launch.
Okay. Well, Avni, this now I'm going to get into the personal stuff, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So, hopefully our audience is a lot of young folks with the dream of becoming an entrepreneur. If you could talk to your younger self, knowing what you know today, what kind of advice do you think you'd give yourself?
I would say definitely have a vision, have a point of view that's different.
Mhm.
Don't just follow the crowd, and definitely solve a problem for the customer base you're looking at, right? I always say don't create solutions in search of problems. I think you're going to have a harder time fitting that in, but if you know the problem exists and you're going to go solve for that, I think you'll have a lot more success. So definitely have a point of view that is very, very crisp and clear, even if it's vertical focused or whatever it is, just have a very crisp, clear view of what you're going to solve for sure. And then I would say hire correctly, hire slowly, and ensure you have the right team around you that can help you really gain momentum.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Well, we keep these to about 20, 30 minutes, these interviews, but I tell you, I mean, this has been a great one. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I thank you so much for joining the podcast. We're
Thank you for
really
having me.
grateful to be able to share your insights with our listeners. I hope we can do a continuation of this at some time in the future.
I would love.
I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to our audience. Thank you so much for joining us on the MAPcast, and we look forward to bringing you many, many more interesting speakers in the future. Thank you, Avni. And you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Thanks so much, Paul, and thanks everybody.
Thanks
Excited
so
to see
much.
you.
It's been a real
Thank you.
pleasure, Avni. Thank you for joining
Likewise.
us.
Bye.
All right. Bye bye.